What's this?
You think I'm a spoiled brat?
I like to be taken care of. There's nothing wrong with that.
I like the way you take care of me.
You're a family man now?
A wife, kids. Who are you kidding?
Closing lab. Sorry, but you're out of a job. You can follow orders. You got everything to gain. If you don't have it in you, now's the time to say it.
Well, of all the X-Men to give a solo picture to. Really? Bobby Drake? Oh, man.
I have to say, I was really goddamn disappointed in this movie. This movie had nothing to do with X-Men Origins Iceman. Come on, man. Don't tease me like that.
I think they may have killed the X-Men Origins line of films for very good reason.
Michael Shannon did as Zod, yeah, and I don't blame him. You know, he's working for DC now. But yeah, forget what I said about X-Men Origins. I was more than enthusiastic just to know that Michael Shannon was in this, to see his acting prowess displayed once again. The lucky few of us that actually get to see this movie. I was actually surprised they didn't give this movie a wide release, because somebody, the caliber of Michael Shannon deserves a full wide release. Just so people will know.
Okay. Full price for Michael Shannon already.
Well,
yes.
Usually when Ghost is being hyperbolic about something, I'm like, all right, tone it down, but I'm kind of with him on this one. I don't think general audiences have any idea who Michael Shannon is really yet, but like critics are now like, oh, Michael Shannon's in it? I have to drive to Dallas to see it? I'll be there.
9 a.m., no problem. I'm showing up at 7.
So, yeah, I was not only excited to see Michael Shannon in this, but the fact that Michael Shannon is playing a real-life mafia hitman, Richard Kuklinski, who was known as the Iceman, who's this famous guy who killed over 100 people. I mean, a real piece of shit.
Oh, yeah.
A psychopath.
Yeah, a complete psychopath. And that, like, Shannon is playing this character. It's a very central role for him. Oh, fuck, yeah.
Oh, hell yeah. And, it's also funny that this guy, he had a HBO special about him, where he was just pretty much being interviewed about his whole time working for the mob, just the type of guy he was, just you understood where at first I didn't know how the name Iceman came into play, but just hearing how he just he didn't care two shits about human life. If it's somebody he needed to take out, he would do it without even having second thoughts about it. I'm like, oh, no wonder they call him the Iceman.
Well, it wasn't simply that he'd take them out, but he'd also have fun with it. He'd have people like, hey, you know what? You believe in God. Why don't you get on your knees and pray? And maybe I'll disappear when you open your eyes.
And even more,
oops, guess not.
And even more literally, he would freeze the bodies.
Yes,
because it made it harder to detect apparently time of death.
Right.
Yeah.
So that made that one less piece of evidence in case something couldn't be traced back.
And in the real world where there's not CSI that can do all this super science detective work, for a normal coroner, they just go like, oh, yeah, it looks like you died 2 weeks ago. There you go. Write it down.
Yeah.
Well, I think this took place in, the 70s, right?
Yeah, well, it takes place over time. You can see time change. And it's mostly the 70s and 80s.
And the thing about this guy is, right from the beginning, it's clear something is wrong with his brain. He's got this very set idea of what he wants out of his life. As he's a younger man, he's working at a projectionist at a porno theater. He's decided that...
No. He's not working as a projectionist in a porno theater. They're making like their own sort of, they're filming pornos on their own and doing it for the mafia.
Well, he's working at the theater, but he's kind of the guy who's making sure that these edited together films get picked up when they're supposed to be picked up by the mafia. So he's only tertiary wise a mafia guy.
Right.
But he's so determined, like nothing seems to matter except that he's decided that Winona Ryder, who works across the street, is the woman he's going to marry and have kids with, and he will brook no dissent on this matter.
And I don't blame him at all. She has aged like a fine wine. I mean, wow.
It's funny you say that, because looking at her in this movie, I was like, man, she looks so good. But then I remembered that at the premiere of Frankenweenie, I got to see her up close right after her bodyguard knocked me out of the way. And I was like, nah, this chick is aged. They're doing some great movie magic.
I don't know about that. Maybe that bodyguard knocked the living hell out of your brain.
I got to see her before he shoved me. It's almost like he was like, hey, don't look too close.
You didn't happen to see two Winona Riders, did you?
But so he, early on grabs her up, says, okay, we're together now. And this intro of the film, there's a big break between the setup of his life and then later as he's been doing it for a while and he's married and has kids and all that. The other part of the setup is basically he meets the local mob group, which is run by Ray Liotta.
Because who else is going to play a mobster except Ray Liotta? Look. If you need a mobster or a crooked cop, Ray Liotta's phone is going to ring automatically. He's going to show up.
Yeah, exactly.
If you write a script with either one of those characters, he's automatically there.
Hey, Leon, it made sense to me. I didn't need to know any backstory about this guy. I was like, of course he's in the mob. Yeah, all right, let's get on with the story.
I wonder if Ray Liotta even acts anymore.
He actually belongs to the mob.
Yeah.
He has to pay them a kickback on every movie he's in now.
He's the representative of the mob. You're still making us look good. We like you.
but he ends up through basically just showing what a cold, emotionless son of a bitch he is. They're like, wow, we're kind of impressed with this guy. Go kill that homeless guy. He's like, all right. Like, no thought. So here is flashy years later, and he is been a hitman for them for a while. He is a badass because he don't need nobody. He goes in, he does the job, he walks away. No harm done except for the guy who gets killed.
but the guy does have a soft spot, and that soft spot is his family. And I like that they actually brought that into the movie here, where this is a guy who does have his own set of rules. He has a code. He doesn't take out any women or children. And the fact that as soon as things start to happen in the story where he gets in trouble with the guys who he's working with, and then they start threatening his family. I thought that's when the best tension of the movie really mounts up to where you're like, man, for some reason I should not really give a shit about this guy and his situation because, he's made his bed. He has to lie in it. He should have known better. But once that comes into play with his two young daughters and Winota's, his wife, I mean, I couldn't help but kind of root for the guy through that last act of the movie where I was hoping, I was like, man, I want to see this guy unleash his fury on the people who have hired him. And
he still has to suffer.
Yeah, at some point, yeah. But but that's the thing with the film itself. I thought that's where it kind of lost me a bit.
Well, it sets you up for that revenge fantasy, and it doesn't deliver on that.
Which is weird considering through the rest of the film, it's following a pretty standard rise through the crime ranks type story that's elevated largely just by Michael Shannon, who not takes stuff that feels like in the hands of anybody else would have been originally intended to be read and performed a different way, but he brings something to the material by pushing through the sociopath, that his character is, that makes him impossible to tear your eyes off of.
And, it's funny how often we do these and everybody's, or at least, I don't know if people say this, but we always fear that because we always agree, it just gets kind of boring.
Yeah.
Well, this is that time I'm going to disagree with you.
Uh-oh.
Mm-hmm. I was not a big fan of this movie.
Fuck you, dude. You don't know what the hell a good movie is anymore.
Leon, I give you some old bullshit.
Now, sorry it wasn't in 3D, Leon. Jeez.
You should have sat up close.
Yeah. Should have put your face on the screen.
Okay. Is the comedy hour
anyway, what do you think?
Are we still back in the Catskills?
Anyway, Cyrus, what do you think about the movie?
Either you're going to juggle. Waka, waka, waka.
Oh, my God.
I didn't dislike the movie, but I wasn't in love with it. Matter of fact, to me, it reminded me a lot. It's on that same level of that movie, Kill the Irishman, where, it's about a true crime story, about something that really happened, and I really like the lead actor in it. But, part of what hurts this movie for me is that I saw the HBO documentaries with the actual Iceman. And Michael Shannon, he's a great actor, and he really brings something to his role. But he's not the Iceman. I mean, Michael Shannon, he comes off as a disturbed guy who you can't get a bead on. He's just kind of weird. It's almost like it's odd that Winona that she marries him and he has this perfect family. As much of a kind of a creep as he is, whereas the Iceman, when he's interviewed, he's actually kind of a charming guy. Like, he likes to talk. Michael Shannon is very much like, I don't like to talk. But the Iceman himself, he liked to talk. That was what was so weird about him. And he had this whole thing about respecting him. Because there's a point where the reporter is asking him stuff, and he asks him some question, and the guy stops. The Iceman stops, just looks at him for a while, almost kind of smiling. He's like, you know what? Nothing else about it, but I'm on this side of the bars, and I'm trying to do better.
So
ask me something else.
I'm still the old me. There's just these bars here.
Yeah, pretty much. And I found that completely terrorizing. This I found to be like they took a story, a real story that was actually very scary, and turned it into kind of like a middle of the road sort of, as you put, Cyrus, mobsters rise to power and then to fall.
And go ahead.
Well, I understand what you're saying. I saw the same specials. The thing is, though, is that I wouldn't really bring that into this movie because this is before those specials even happened. I mean, you have to understand this guy was getting interviewed. He was becoming famous. So when you watch those interviews, he was already used to, being a sort of celebrity now. This guy that just came out and just said, so I think that charming aspect that you saw, I think that came after the fact that, and I was like, I can't really, never really thought about bringing in the story because this is the origin of the guy that we know now, the guy who gets interviewed. This is kind of his origin. And I couldn't imagine, besides him being charming to his family, which I thought there was moments in there where when he's with his family, sure, he's not trying to kill them. He's being a father. He's being a father and just, especially, being a friend, to one of his best friends. I did see the two sides of this guy, and, I don't know, as far as just being an effective film, I thought at least the stuff with the mom and his family, that was kind of clicking with me. But yes, I do agree with you that it seems like with with the main plot and the subplot, they didn't really take it to where you would expect something like this, something like a Goodfellas or something. They didn't give it that heightened sense of, super tension, especially dealing with these characters, because some of these characters, especially Ray Liotta, they'll have a big part in the movie, but at the tail end of the movie, it's just like they're gone. Yeah. And I thought that was the biggest fault of the movie. And that's where it becomes a problem, where it becomes something like,
Chris Evans' character was another one of those where it's interesting where he comes in, but then he's gone for such a long period of time. And when he comes back, it's like, man, well, you don't introduce a character like this just to not use him.
And it's too bad because he was a great character.
He was.
I mean, even though he's a real guy, the way Chris Evans played him, I was really blown away by his performance in this movie as well.
Yeah. Both him and Ray Liotta, they're building subplots around them almost, especially Ray Liotta. And they're building up as characters only for you to realize that, wow, the director's only interested in them as so far as they serve making a Michael Shannon's character story move along, really. And it was like, well, why did you even bother then?
Right.
I kept wondering if it was like the contrast between, what Michael Shannon was opposed to all these other people who killed people as well.
Yeah. No, I didn't have a problem with him playing it differently than you say the actual Iceman at all. It's a fictionalized version, and I think in that sense, his portrayal of this killer is haunting. It's really frightening, and I think he brings a lot more subtlety to it in the way he chose to play it than maybe this actual guy, the way he really would have been.
No, not necessarily, but I think with his character, I felt like it was trying to have it both ways, where it's like, oh, he's a cold psychopath who'll kill anybody and not think twice about it. Oh, but he's a family man who really cares and has his passion. And I know the real guy, that's how he was. Like, that was the one thing he cared about, was his family. But they were playing fast and loose with how emotional he was or wasn't in this movie. At least for me, I felt like they had two different characters, and they were trying to get me to side with him. And of course, that's what you would do with a character like this. But for me, it wasn't gelling. I was seeing it as two separate things and not blending into one.
I guess what I got out of it, which is something that's not uncommon for people who are psychopaths or sociopaths, is to have this idea of what structure they need to be a normal person. And that becomes the only thing that they really, that makes any sense to them. There's still no real emotion, per se.
Sure.
But they think that's what you're supposed to do. This is how this is how I'm a man.
Yeah.
And so they build this. And I felt like that's what Shannon was trying to put in this. Like, this is a guy who doesn't really love his family. He just thinks that's what you're supposed to do.
Yeah. He's cold as ice. Come on, you gotta feel something for somebody. Got a girlfriend?
I'm married.
Then why do you act like you don't give it?
What do you want?
I think there's a scene in here that actually has Stephen Dorff. Stephen Dorff is also in the movie. He's in a very brief scene where, he's the one who plays his brother, his
Remember?
His brother.
Okay.
Where what you're talking about as far as this guy who's really wanting to be this family man, who still is trying to convince himself that he's very normal in some way. I thought that scene really played out really well, where you see his brother, who is this crazy psychopath maniac, this person,
off the rails.
Off the rails, something he could have become easily, because they had the same upbringing. His that conversation that he has with his brother, I thought worked great, as far as his brother was trying to convince, hey, you're no different than I am, but by the way, I like your family. I want to be an uncle. And you're just like, oh, shit.
No.
Well, that's just it. It's like the thing that separates him from his brother, and I think maybe that was his whole goal. It's like, no, I'm going to be a normal person, which is how little he understands what a normal person is.
I am not you.
Hey, how'd you guys like seeing Fat David Schwimmer?
Wasn't that weird?
It was weird enough with his mustache, but I'm glad that the movie made sure to point out how ridiculous he looked with that mustache.
Yeah.
Ray Liotta's like, you going to keep that?
He was less Ross and more Roscoe.
That's a guy.
That greasy ponytail, though.
That's a guy you're just waiting to see just get killed because he's the dumbest. But that's another problem. That becomes that's a big subplot in this movie. But you're like, why?
Fizzles.
It comes to an end, but at the same time, it never has any emotional resonance whatsoever. To the point you're like, what does this have to do with anything else in this movie at all? Either as an emotional beat or like tying back into the story. It doesn't. Either one.
Not at all.
It's just kind of there. I guess all I can guess is David Schwimmer's friends with somebody.
Right.
He's like, come on, man. Come on, man. It's Ross.
I was great in Band of Brothers. I was great in Band of Brothers. Does anybody remember that? The first 3 episodes.
Now, somebody who came back who I really did like in this was Robert Davi.
Yeah.
I thought he was great.
Oh, yeah.
I haven't seen that guy in a long time.
And James Franco has kind of a funny miniature role. Where you're like, is that James Franco?
He plays Alien in this. Look at my shit. Look at my shit.
Well, that's the thing. When James Franco showed up, I was like, is he playing a character or is he playing James Franco?
Yeah. I was waiting for him to show Michael Shannon all his different color shorts and his collection of guns.
Now, even though this film definitely has a lot of problems, it's not devoid at all of tension. I feel like it builds that pretty well. It just never manages to get the payoff that a film like this really deserves. On the whole, as it's going along, even though, like I said, it's kind of by the book, I'm still really enjoying it until it gets to that last act when it just kind of, it's like, well, we don't want to stray too far from what actually happened. But, at this point, I'm like, you know what? Take license. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's a movie.
It is one of those things where I suppose had it picked one or the other, I would have liked it more. But it does, it goes on that line and it leaves me going like, you could have been somebody,
You're
Charlie.
Almost there. You're almost there. But it's just yet more proof, though, that Michael Shannon is one of the best people working today. If you're a fan of his at all, and you should be, what the fuck's wrong with you?
Yeah.
This is one you're not going to want to miss, but it's also not going to be the film that catapults him to A-list.
No.
That's probably going to be Superman.
Yeah,
I hope. I can only hope.
So. Well, I say at the very least people will come out of it going, well, the movie sucked, but Michael Shannon
Michael Shannon was brilliant. Yeah. Should have been just called Zod.
Zod.
I was like, okay, I know Cole's going to give this a full price because it's got Captain America teaming up with General Zod.
Hey, you don't know that.
Oh, really?
By the way, full price.
I wish I could have liked this more. Like, ultimately, it is kind of a letdown, but it's still well worth your time. It's a good matinee.
I'm right there with you. I don't think it's certainly worth your time. Some good performances in there, but it can't. At least I couldn't help but just think about how much it kept missing the mark on being great. And I don't know. I don't want to say I was bored in it, but it just annoyed me, like how close it was to something and wasn't. So it's more of like a low matinee for me.
Like you guys said, at least Cyrus, there's a lot of tension, in this film, and those are the parts that were really effective for me. And sure, it kind of petered out at the end, but still, man, you cannot ignore what Michael Shannon brought to the table. If only he had a better script. Too bad script writers and directors can't be as awesome as Michael Shannon.
True.
But the thing is,
that's asking too much.
Yeah, I know it is. It is asking too much, but man, the guy sure does deliver. I mean, I give his performance a better than sex, while I give this movie a matinee, because this movie should have been a lot more, and they should have taken that artistic license to do, to veer off the true story a bit. But I mean, they could have done it. They've done it with Goodfellas. They've done it with plenty of other gangster type movies, but this one it should have been knocked out of the park.
Not quite there.
No, and by the way, Leon, kneel before Michael Shannon!
Or else.
There ain't gonna be nothing else to be afraid of.
I didn't know I was supposed to be afraid.
What are you doing? You praying? You think God's gonna save you? You tell him to come down and stop me. I guess God's busy. Don't!